Hello and welcome to Cairns FM 89.1. It's International Women's Day and I have the pleasure of the company of Kirsty Nancarrow here in the studio today. Kirsty, how are you this fine International Women's Day?
I am very well, thanks, Anna, and happy International Women's Day to you and everybody.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Kirsty, for those people out there in Cairns and beyond that are listening today, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here in Cairns?
So I've been in Cairns for about 12 years. I grew up in Sydney and I was in Alice Springs for 10 years before coming to Cairns. I initially moved here for a job with the ABC, but now I have a company called Emotion Video Training and Production with another fabulous woman, Susie Cray, and we're proud female founders, and we've been running our workshops for the past 3 years in Cairns and elsewhere in Far North Queensland and now beyond, teaching people how to make videos using their smartphone, because everybody has one these days, and we just, with our 30 years each of media industry experience, thought, why don't we actually put those tools in the hands of people, using something they already have. So we love teaching our workshops and getting people making videos, which are really an amazing way, as is radio, to connect with people.
Do the people you teach, is it mainly for personal use or business use or a little bit of both?
We find we have a lot of small business people who are wanting to bring their video production in-house because it is quite expensive. We do video production as well, but it is an expensive exercise, and we figure with a bit of instruction, knowing how to use your phone to the best effect, that we can give you the skills to really do it yourself. We do a lot of training for in-house for a lot of organisations as well. They bring us in to train their whole teams once again so that they've got that power to put out video content and take advantage of spontaneous moments to be able to do that. So a range of people. We have had other people who have just wanted to learn how to make their better travel videos and videos for their special occasion, birthdays and anniversaries and film family events as well. So we have had the whole range of people.
Diving into International Women's Day, you say you have a journalism background. Did you know as a young girl at school that was what you were going to be doing with your life? It was always like a that's what I'm doing and just went for it?
I most certainly did. I decided I wanted to be a journalist when I was 9 years old, and that was largely around my relationship with my grandfather. He passed away when I was 10 and he was my last surviving grandparent. So I haven't had grandparents for a very long time, but we were always very connected around writing and poetry. And he said to me when I was 9 years old something about reminding him of Jana Wendt. And at the time she was a very well-respected, high-profile anchor woman for programs like Current Affair and 60 Minutes. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And I really had laser focus towards that goal ever since.
Are your parents like from a writing background as well, or no?
No, my father was a teacher. My mother worked in accounts. So really the writing came from my grandfather, I believe.
Having been in that industry for quite some time, you would have come across a lot of obstacles or challenges. How have you learned to deal with them or overcome them in your time as a journalist?
It is difficult. We talk a lot about the impact of vicarious trauma on frontline workers like police, ambulance officers, but no one really thinks about journalists in that way, where they're every day telling the stories, witnessing the trauma, sharing those lived experiences of other people and trying to present the facts in a sensitive way, but ultimately keeping a distance from our own emotions about those things. So it was challenging. I had a lot of stories in Alice Springs that were very confronting, a lot of very violent court cases and murders, that sort of thing. And I thought coming to Cairns I might get some relief from that, but there was a whole string of really horrific things that happened in my time at the ABC here. And you might remember the Murray Street child murders, which was very tragic for the whole community, I think, and the whole of Australia really felt that pain. And also I was a camera woman by then for the ABC as well. They trained us up as video journalists, and I was at the the first camera on scene at the Ravenshoe Cafe explosion, which 2 women ultimately lost their lives from. So it did chip away, and I did find ultimately that my emotional resilience was lost, and I did develop depression, and then was later diagnosed with PTSD. So it does take its toll. So there are challenges. You always have to balance your own feelings towards something with the job that you have to do. And I have to say that day in Ravenshoe with those sea of ambulances was the hardest day of my life in terms of being conflicted about the job that I had to do. I found it really difficult not to just drop everything and help, because that's what I felt needed to happen on the day. And here I was having to news gather, do live crosses, and did do that as sensitively as I could, but it did have a big impact on me.
Yes, certainly. I can imagine that would have. You said you had PTSD as a result of a lot of traumatic experiences that you had to witness and report on. How did you eventually come through that?
I had to take some time out of the workforce and just have a complete reset. I didn't think at that point that there would be anything else for me. I actually thought my career was over, and I thought if I actually did another job, that something like putting those little stickers on fruit would be about the limit of my ability. That's kind of the point at which it got to. So I lost my self-worth. I lost all of my confidence. And I was actually the chief of staff at ABC at the time. So I was responsible for a lot of people and all of the editorial output for the bureau. So I just thought I have to step away. I have to just get better. So I did. And I think it was very, very challenging. There was a point where my husband and I have been discussing this recently, where it was very scary. I was very scared. I didn't recognise myself, and I didn't want to be here. So if I didn't have the support of my family, some friends who were happy to spend time with me on my terms, like I didn't feel like going out, being social, that I gradually kind of got a little bit better. I was on antidepressants, but they had horrible side effects. Apart from that, I just really wanted to stop. So stopping really helped. One of the big issues was that I hadn't slept properly for 5 months, and I would hear the birds in the morning, and instead of that being a delight, I would be like, that's another whole night that I haven't slept. And that went on for 5 months before I was just at complete breaking point. So having the time off, being able to sleep, not having to be anywhere, not having to be responsible for anything or anyone or deadlines, and not having that anxiety about what bad things are going to happen today that I have to cover, that was good. Time in nature has been really, really helpful. And we live in the most beautiful place. You can just walk out your door and pretty much be in a rainforest. So walking and just spending time in nature, being with my dog, and that was really great. Billy is an Alice Springs camp dog, and we brought her to Cairns, and she was just there with me, and she was what got me out of the house in the first place. I thought, you have to go for a walk. I need to go for a walk. I don't really want to go for a walk, but you need it. So being able to put my energy into somebody else that needed it was great. And then ultimately, what helped me was deciding to go and volunteer in Batasi village in Nepal. I'd had contact with a Nepalese man here, Som Tamang, who lost all of the school and the hostel and his brother in the earthquake in 2015. And I became more aware of the work that he was doing in the months after. And I thought, well, in natural disasters, people tend to jump in and help straight away. And then, a year or two goes past and people are still traumatised, people still need help. And I thought, well, it was 18 months past the earthquake. I thought this is the right time for me to go and help. So I volunteered as a teacher for a month in Batasi, and that was where I really found my purpose and my self-worth again.
You also wrote a book, I believe, about Som and his experience in his life. Is that correct?
That's right. So having that full immersion in his village, Batasi, which is northeast of Kathmandu, in a very remote place, poor, about 3,000 metres above sea level. They don't have much, but they are so happy. And I thought we could really learn from this. And Som had created this environment where children who may have been at risk of being trafficked or being sold off to slavery, like he was as a child, or getting married young and that, particularly women, that being their life, they just take on, they live with their in-laws, they look after them into their old age, they farm, they have babies. There's no talk of education being a thing for them, or certainly not a career beyond education. So being there and actually seeing the difference that his work was making with these kids going to school every day, and they were so excited about it, and particularly the young women, they're just shining. I thought, he's got an incredible story, and what he's created is also incredible. So I came back from that trip in 2016 and I said, I want to write your story. So it took a few years beyond that to actually make the book happen. I went back in 2018 on a women-only fundraising trek to Everest Base Camp. That was the lengths I had to go to get the interviews for the book. But it also gave me a real experience and a sense of what it's like in the Himalayas. And we talk about him being a trekking guide in the book. So I wanted to get a real sense of what that looked like, smelt like, felt like. And so in 2018, I went back and gathered the interviews with his family and people that he'd helped, and had that experience of going further into the Himalayas. And then went back to work. I was at Queensland Health by then. And then by the end of 2019, my husband was sort of like, if you don't step away from the workforce, you're never going to write this book. And it was a passion project, and we had to obviously make some provisions for us to be losing one wage out of the family for me to do that. So we started sort of putting a bit more money away, being a little bit more frugal. And then by the middle of 2020, we felt like I was in a position to be able to put my energy into the book. And thankfully I also got a regional arts development grant from the Cairns Regional Council, which was a real kind of endorsement from the universe that this is what I should be doing at this time. So yes, the book is now finished. It's Himalayan Dreams, the story of Som Tamang. I actually launched it on International Women's Day last year at a Rotary breakfast in Cairns, but as yet we are yet to find a publisher. Som and I had a conversation at the Cairns Tropical Writers Festival just recently, and people were blown away by the story. I'm just yet to get it in front of the right pair of eyes to say, we think this has got amazing potential, universal themes, and will resonate with people, because I certainly think it does. It's got so many beautiful themes in there, but at the core of his story is his desire to empower women.
Well, I'm sure there'll be you'll definitely find a publisher after this, because it's definitely an amazing book. So, how did you know you were better after all the PTSD and everything else? Was it through that trip and writing the book, and was there a point where you knew you were okay, or was it just just happened?
I did actually get treatment, and I think without that treatment I wouldn't be okay. I had about 18 months of a treatment called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming, which is incredibly effective. I'd never heard of it before, but in the course of my mental health treatment, this sort of emerged as a modality that might work for me. And it's pretty confronting. You have to kind of go back to these traumatic memories and essentially relive them, but the process of the EMDR changes the neural pathways, so they're not traumatic memories anymore. So if I think about those incidents that I was really traumatized by now, it's almost like a faded photograph. There's no kind of anxiety. Like my palms used to sweat. I would have panic attacks. I wouldn't be able to watch things like explosions on television. And now I can do that without being triggered. So the treatment was incredibly effective. And just continuing to be kind to myself, I think, really helped along the way. But yes, I think there got to a point in my treatment where I felt like I was okay again. And I think jumping out of the ABC, because I did go back for a while after I had my time off, and I went straight back into the newsroom, back into a traumatizing environment. I just knew it wasn't right. Like, it's what I wanted to do my whole career and life, and put so much of my life into that goal. And it's really hard to let go of something when you've dedicated your whole life to it. But at one point I had to just say, look, this is not working for me, and perhaps I can use my skills in another way. So I really enjoyed doing that for Queensland Health and communications team for several years, and was actually working there when the pandemic started. So that was a really interesting time to be a communicator and actually trying to help protect the public. Yeah, at that point I got my self-confidence back, realised that I still had something to give. And certainly the book gave me a lot of purpose and actually reignited my passion as a writer. I'd been a journalist and instant gratification every day with being in news. It was something I had to let go of because books take a long time and research and patience. And but yes, that's a long-winded answer.
That's okay. Do you have any projects in the pipeline? Any other books that you're looking at writing, or?
Interestingly enough, after my presentation at the Cairns Tropical Writers Festival, I had several people come up to me and say, "You have your own book. Where's your book? You need to write your own book." And I said, I probably will eventually. No one likes to think about people being interested in their story, but as a media trainer, I'm constantly telling people everybody has a story. Every single person has some insight, some history, some life experience that they can share and give something to somebody else. So I think at some point I will write my story. Do I have the time or the energy to do it now? No. I'm running a business and doing lots of other things. So my main goal at the moment is to get this book published, and we'll see where we go.
Is there a woman that you have interviewed in your career, or maybe more than one, that has made a lasting impression on you, and why?
The name that popped into my head is someone called Michelle Castagna, and sadly she's not here with us anymore. She died in 2016, but I met Michelle when I was working for the ABC in Alice Springs, and she was a fierce disability advocate, multicultural community advocate. She dedicated her life to helping people, and I've always had a strong pull throughout my journalism career, dating back to my first job on my local newspaper at 18, with people who are lifting other people up and overcoming adversity, which is why I think I was attracted to Som's story. And Michelle developed poliomyelitis when she was 7 years old, but just went on to do amazing things. She got an Order of Australia medal. She was the coordinator of disability services in the Northern Territory for years. And she was razor sharp and, never ever let her disability stand in the way of progress. And I remember covering a story where she was trying to get a decision overturned in the lead up to the 2000 Olympics. The torch actually landed in Australia at Uluru, and I was there for that experience. But in the process of nominating people to carry the torch, there was a gentleman in Alice Springs who had applied to, and they said he couldn't be in his own wheelchair, and that was a hugely offensive thing that Michelle took up as a campaign, and ultimately she won. He got to carry the torch, and he got to do it his own way. So she just really impressed me as somebody who was unapologetically advocating, and she had a lasting impression on me. So Michelle, there's probably lots of other women that I've interviewed, but she really struck me. I had the pleasure of interviewing Anita Jacoby at the Cairns Tropical Writers Festival, and she also really impressed me. I've been helping the Women in Media Australia organisation since its inception, first under the MEAA and then separately, and I set up Women in Media Far North Queensland. And Anita is now the co-chair, as well as many, many other high-profile positions. And she's incredibly humble for somebody who's had an amazing career as a TV producer and been responsible and behind programs like Enough Rope with Andrew Denton, the Laws program on Foxtel, Hungry Beast, and many of these sort of household name programs. Good Morning Australia, Today Show. She was a pioneer in the industry. She talked about having 3 attempts at trying to get a senior role as an executive producer on one of the programs she worked for, and she just never gave up. And I could really admire the tenacity of women in our industry who just don't accept no for an answer. They're like, well, you've overlooked us several times, but we're not giving up.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. We need more people like that, I think. What sort of a role would you like to play as far as women's rights go?
I think I've always had social justice and advocacy for women at my core as well. And throughout my journalism career, I've always mentored not just women, young men as well, but particularly women. Like, any young journalist that came to Cairns, whether they worked for the ABC or Seven or Win when we had more of a presence here, or Cairns Post, I would always sort of take the new journalists aside if we were covering court, for instance, and just make sure that they were okay and get them to ask questions if they had them, because ultimately it helps all of us if everyone's doing the job well. So I've advocated in that way and supported women, certainly through the raising awareness about Som's work through the Friends of Himalayan Children and Take on Nepal, because he has a trekking business with a focus on women, training women guides, which is very unusual in the industry. I guess my women's advocacy goes to just highlighting what other people are doing as well.
Any final words that you would like to, or thoughts that you would like to give us to as a takeaway today on International Women's Day?
I think we can't do it alone, and something that Som said in our talk was, this is not just about empowering women, it's empowering boys and men to empower women as well. I have an incredible husband and stepson, and they are very much part of who I am and my success and my support. And I think, this is not a lonely journey where we're just championing women at the detriment of men. I've always loved the men and the boys who have been in my life, and I think, it's something that we need to do together. Yes, we've got some way to go with equality, but things are certainly better in our country than they are in places like Nepal, where they have still a long way to progress. But yes, just let's not discount the boys and the men.
Absolutely. Kirsty, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here on Cairns FM today. We hope you have a happy rest of the day here on International Women's Day.
Thanks, Anna.
And we'll be back right after this.